On Thursday, roughly 50,000 people crossed from Morocco into Ceuta, the Spanish city on the North African coast. Ceuta has 83,595 residents, so in about 24 hours, its population rose by close to 60%. Spain's Interior Ministry stresses that its estimate is provisional, and Ceuta's own government puts the figure nearer 60,000. Almost none of this involved defeating Spain's border. Most of those people walked or swam around the end of a concrete breakwater that runs a few meters into the sea. They did it because a Spanish court had ruled a month earlier that anyone arriving that way could not be summarily sent back. So in this video, we're going to explain what the Supreme Court actually decided, why it took a month for that decision to produce 50,000 people, and why Spain's answer is now to build a barrier in the water. Never miss an episode. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and stay in the loop. Let's start with Ceuta itself, because the geography is doing more work here than the politics. Ceuta is a Spanish city of about 19 square kilometers on the Moroccan coast, directly across the strait from Gibraltar. Its 8 kilometers of land border are one of only 2 places where the European Union touches Africa by land. That border has been hardened almost continuously for 30 years. The fence dates from 1996, when it stood 3 meters high, and successive governments have raised it since to 7.8 meters and to 10 at the points engineers considered weakest. And then it stops at the waterline, where the land border reaches the sea at a place called Tarajal. The frontier carries on along a concrete breakwater. That breakwater once extended some 30 meters into the water. Erosion has cut it back to a few meters in places, which at low tide is something a person can walk around. From the Moroccan town of Fnidek, the swim is about 5 kilometers, and people make it on inflatable rings. For years, that gap mattered less than it should have because of a Spanish legal instrument with no real equivalent elsewhere in Europe. Under a 2015 amendment to the immigration law, officers in Ceuta and Melilla may carry out what the statute calls rejection at the border. A person caught crossing can be handed straight back to Morocco with no file, no hearing, and no lawyer. That is the arrangement that broke on the 29th of June. The case that broke it was not brought by a campaign group. It started with one Algerian man who tried to swim into Ceuta in November 2024, was intercepted at sea, and was handed to the Moroccan authorities. He challenged the decision in court and won. The Spanish state appealed, and the state lost. In Judgment 814 of 2026, the Supreme Court held that the summary procedure applies only to people who cross by overcoming what the law calls border containment elements. In practice, the fences. Surveillance equipment does not qualify, because cameras, sensors, and drones detect people but do not stop them. Somebody who swims around the end of a breakwater has therefore overcome nothing and cannot be handed back on the spot. They are entitled to the ordinary removal procedure, which means a written decision, a lawyer, and an interpreter. The judgment was reported in the Spanish press on the 8th of July. Here it is worth being careful about what the numbers show, because the simple version of this story is not quite right. Ceuta's irregular land arrivals had been running at about 15 a day, and in the second half of June they fell to roughly 6. In the first 2 weeks of July, the fortnight in which the ruling became public, they came back to about 16, which is to say, they returned to normal. The acceleration arrives later, in the last 10 days of the month. By the week ending the 29th of July, Ceuta's government was reporting more than 1,500 arrivals in 7 days, and a civil guard spokesperson described it as a slow trickle since the ruling that had suddenly become an explosion. Then came Thursday, and roughly 50,000. So the ruling did not flip a switch. What Spanish officials describe instead is a rumor with a long fuse. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, speaking in Ceuta on Friday, said smuggling networks had spread a self-serving interpretation of the judgment, that anyone reaching Spain by sea could no longer be returned. Morocco's embassy in Madrid blames criminal organizations as well. Neither government has produced evidence of a specific campaign. Whatever carried the message, it landed on a population already primed to move. Fnidek, the town immediately across the border, used to live off Ceuta, until Morocco permanently closed the hand-carried border trade in December 2019 and ended the livelihood of more than half the town. On Thursday, crowds gathered on the Moroccan side near Fnidek and moved toward the border in groups. Some climbed the fence, and Spanish media reported passivity from the Moroccan police as they did so, which Rabat denies reflected any intention on its part. Many more went into the water. At a rate police put it around 300 an hour. By Thursday evening, the Spanish Spanish government had ordered military units to the border with diving teams in the water. The death toll from those hours is genuinely unresolved. The central government's on-record figure is at least 18. Ceuta's president says at least 34. The news agency EFE reported 43, and El País counted 57. Most of the dead drowned trying to get around the breakwater, and recovery work was still going on as this was written. To put 50,000 in perspective, Frontex recorded a little over 49,000 irregular crossings at every external border of the European Union combined in the first 6 months of this year. One day in Ceuta was about the same as 6 months everywhere else. As far as the record goes, the largest single-day irregular entry the EU has seen, and yet almost nobody who crossed can go anywhere, which is the part that tends to get lost. Ceuta is Spanish territory, and the Schengen rules apply to it, but when Spain joined the Schengen Convention in 1991, it attached a declaration letting it keep identity and document checks on every departure bound for the rest of Spain. There is no bridge and no tunnel. Reaching Ceuta gets you into Spain and nowhere else. Europe reacted as though that were not true. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said she was prepared to suspend the Schengen agreement with Spain, and her foreign minister went further, calling for the Schengen area to be closed to Spain altogether. Italy does not share a border with Spain. France, which does, ordered an immediate reinforcement of checks on the Spanish side. There is, incidentally, no procedure in European law for removing a member state from Schengen. Meanwhile, the returns had already started, and they went back the way they came. By early Friday afternoon, the Interior Ministry said about 25,000 people had returned to Morocco, and by 3:30 it was putting the number at 37,500. El País reported people walking back across the same breakwater, directed by soldiers showing them the route. The ministry describes these as voluntary returns. At this point, an obvious question is, under what law is any of this happening? Neither Madrid nor Rabat has said. If the returns are summary rejections at the border, they are the procedure the Supreme Court restricted 4 weeks earlier. If they are ordinary removals, each one needs a written decision, a lawyer, and an interpreter, which is not something a state does 50,000 times in an afternoon. The greatest obstacle to a durable answer is the ruling itself, and the solution Spain has reached for comes out of that same ruling. The court never said the fast procedure could not apply at sea. It said the procedure attaches to physical containment elements and that there were none in the water, which reads less like a prohibition than like a specification. On Friday, Sanchez announced a line of buoys at the Tarajal breakwater. Spain has been here before. A minister proposed extending the breakwater by 40 meters after the February 2014 deaths at Tarajal, and a later plan envisaged 400 meters of concrete. Neither was built. This is the fundamental dilemma Spain has ended up with. To make its returns lawful, it has to construct the barrier whose absence the court identified, which means extending a physical frontier into the same water, where at least 18 people, and possibly 3 times that many, died this week. The measure that would restore the legal shortcut is the measure that makes the crossing more dangerous. According to the monitoring group Caminando Fronteras, deaths on the routes to Ceuta and Melilla rose from 88 in 2020 to 712 last year, across 5 years in which the land border was progressively sealed. That leaves the question of whether Morocco allowed this to happen. There are 2 explanations. The first is that Rabat relaxed its controls deliberately as leverage. Reuters, citing the Spanish agency EFE, reported that members of the Moroccan auxiliary force responsible for security on the ground withdrew as the young people passed. The European Council on Foreign Relations said the sheer scale of the crossing suggests Morocco may have relaxed its controls deliberately, and 50,000 people do not assemble quietly on a coast that is watched around the clock. Then there is the calendar. On the 20th of July, Sanchez was in Algiers with the heads of Naturgy, Repsol, and Enagás, looking to buy more gas from Morocco's principal rival. 3 days after that, a committee of the Spanish Congress approved a bill granting Spanish nationality to Saharauis born under Spanish colonial rule, and to their descendants, 100,000 people or more given a vote in Spain on the one dispute Rabat treats as the test of any friendship. 7 days after that, 50,000 people crossed. Those dates carry weight because this has happened before and the last time it worked. In April 2021, Spain quietly admitted Brahim Ghali, the leader of the Polisario Front, to a hospital in Logroño under a false name. In May, Moroccan control at this same border evaporated, and 8,000 to 10,000 people crossed in 2 days. In March 2022, Sanchez endorsed Morocco's autonomy plan for Western Sahara, ending 40 years of Spanish neutrality. Morocco has never acknowledged that the 2021 relaxation was deliberate. 12 days before this crossing, the Spanish daily El Confidencial reported seeing 3 classified CNI assessments written during that earlier crisis, one of them recording instructions from Rabat to relax surveillance along a stretch of the Mediterranean coast. No other Spanish outlet has confirmed the documents. The second explanation is that Morocco lost control of a crowd it had not expected. The same agencies that watched the auxiliary force step back also watched Moroccan police drive people off the gates with water cannon. Spain's own interior ministry spent Thursday crediting Moroccan forces with stopping arrivals, and Moroccan media reported the crossing was organized in WhatsApp groups. Morocco also took the returns immediately, after years of refusing them, which the former Spanish diplomat Gustavo de Aristegui reads as a state that has been caught out and wants control back, rather than one applying pressure. So the evidence does not settle it, because what would settle it is an instruction, and for this week, nobody has produced one. What can be said is that the two explanations are less different than they sound. One describes a border Rabat opened, the other describes a border Rabat was not holding. Neither describes a border Spain controls. In the short term, the crossings have stopped, though not because anything was resolved. Spain and Morocco reinforced the fence together on Friday, which is to say, Rabat closed it. Over the longer term, Spain is left building a wall into the sea to restore a legal distinction on a border that works when its neighbor wants it to work. For 30 years, Spain's frontier in Africa has rested on a distinction between people who climb something and people who swim around it. In June, a court pointed out that only the first of those is actually written into the law. Spain's answer is to go and build the missing object out in the water that has already killed at least 18 people this week. That's all for today. Your daily shot of the world.